Hi, everybody, and welcome to another session of the System Club Masterclass. This is where we talk with people from the internet marketing world, the business world at large, or worlds beyond, because what we're looking for are fresh ideas, new ways of looking at things. And before I introduce our guest, I'm reminded that when the system seminar started, and this is now a long time ago, this is our 20th anniversary, a whole lot of the people that were speaking at the original system seminars didn't have much background in internet marketing at all. And I brought them on not because they had background in internet marketing, but because they had interesting backgrounds that I thought were applicable to what I wanted to convey in the seminar. And so then, of course, things changed, and I started interviewing a lot of super internet marketing experts, and that was sort of interesting. But I feel that that has sort of run its course. I'm not finding a lot of really exciting internet marketing experts anymore. I am finding a lot of good technicians in the internet world, and that's good. But the kind of fundamental insight that we used to be getting from people, I'm not getting anymore from the core internet marketing world. So we've been reaching out to people lately, System Club members, who have very interesting backgrounds that we can draw from to stimulate our thinking and enliven our approach to marketing. A couple of months ago, we had a club member who had a background as a manager, a leader of door-to-door selling teams, and he was also a boxer. That was a great call. I recommend everybody, if you haven't heard that one, go back, because both of those disciplines are absolutely applicable to what we do on the internet and will make you a much more effective person on the internet. And that's the goal. The goal is not to learn the latest bells and whistles and the latest esoteric details. I mean, those are always interesting, and we've always included that in the System Club and the System seminars. But I'm really more interested in fresh blood and fresh thinking. And with that, we've got some really interesting ideas to discuss today. Our guest today is Wes Azadani. Welcome, Wes.
Hi, thank you, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's really great to have Wes on the call, because he introduced me to a brand new word. And it's always wonderful to know a brand new word and a brand new discipline that you didn't even know existed. And as soon as I heard it, I was immediately thinking of how we can apply this new discipline to the way we look at our internet marketing businesses, or internet direct response marketing businesses, heavily using the internet. So Wes, before we talk about one of your areas of specialty, what I'd like to talk about is how you, and I do this with all our guests, where you started, like in your business life and your working life, and how you evolved. Because I always find that's one of the most interesting parts of somebody, how they found their way through the maze.
Yeah, well, it was there was no rags to riches story that you might hear a lot of times in the internet marketing world, but maybe still educational. So, I wanted to be a doctor, and not necessarily because I was good at science or anything like that, but because my parents told me to be a doctor. Otherwise, I would starve. So I didn't want to starve. And so, but as I was doing my neuroscience degree and then my undergrad, I just realized, you know, pretty quickly that it wasn't really for me. I didn't really care too much about, um, neurons and things like that. So I made a pivot and said, okay, what am I good at? I mean, I was always interested in business. So, but still wanting to appease the family by having it somewhat connected to healthcare. So I did a bachelor's degree in healthcare administration. And then from there, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I always was interested in sales. The thing of persuasion, being able to really connect with people and then have them take an action they might not otherwise wanted to take. Not because you're manipulating them, but because maybe you're giving them an insight that they might not have had before. I was always interested in that. So I was looking into healthcare sales. But then I realized all that is just you're going and you're buying lunch for physicians and trying to bribe them to use your drug, and that didn't seem terribly exciting. So instead, I went as a frontline clerk in a hospital, University of Washington Medical System. Worked up the ranks there, within I think 2 years, became a supervisor. Then the administrator who was running my clinic, he went became a VP at Salem Health in Oregon, and he took me with him as to essentially to run one of the family medicine clinics there. And from there, that's why I learned about the lean management system, because Salem Health at that before they were implementing lean management, also known as the Toyota production system, they did not really have a good reputation in the community. It was just considered one of those average vanilla podunk community hospitals that you'd see in your average city. But after they started implementing lean,
I'm sorry to interrupt. So the key word here is lean, L-E-A-N, lean. Wow. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And the agile thing will come later. But really, I mean, for people who want to understand agile, they have to understand lean, because agile is a framework, but lean is a management system. So, I think there's a lot of talk about, I think Ben Settle introduced it, and I think he took it from a sales trainer, about tactics versus strategy, or principles versus strategy. One of the big problems with how people are doing agile now, especially in the corporate world, is that they see it as a set of discrete tactics, but not really understand the principles and foundations under it, which ultimately is lean. And so, but anyway, so worked at Salem Health as a manager for a number of years.
And I'm sorry, I had interrupted something important that you were saying. When you joined them, they actually had a bad reputation locally, or a poor, not a great.
When I would join them, the reputation. When I joined them, the reputation was getting better, but like a couple of years before they started implementing lean, it was not good. It was just not. I mean, it wasn't like a hospital you'd go to die, but it wasn't a hospital you'd want to take your parents there. It was just like mediocre. And healthcare is such a competitive field that you have to really stand out. But when I implemented there, when I came there, they were starting to implement the lean management systems in a serious way, top to bottom, like from the CEO all the way to the janitors, and they were getting good results in terms of patient satisfaction scores, in terms of just lead time, cost reduction, pretty much every metric that matters. And so once I finished my thing there, I thought I'd probably make more money in the IT field. And so I learned, okay, where can I find how to implement lean in the IT field? Where does that happen? And that's when I kind of stumbled upon something called agile product development, agile product software development. So then went and worked for Boeing as an agile coach. And then from there, other clients, and here we are today.
Gotcha. So how did you get trained in lean? Just by osmosis? You were on the scene and you sort of picked it up because they were adopting it, or?
Well, so in two ways. First, there was formal they took. I mean, one of the principles of lean is developing your people. Is developing your people, which is interesting because I feel like a lot of times in the entrepreneur world, especially in the internet marketing world, there isn't that. You don't really have that idea of developing your people. You have this idea of, create good offers, sell it, make enough money. Once you reach a certain point, then delegate, so that you could do the quote unquote important stuff. But as far as developing your people so that they can become better and they can become problem solvers and add value to the business, you don't really see it there. I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in the internet marketing world, it's like hire a vendor. If you don't like the vendor, fire them quickly. Another vendor, etc. But as far as developing your people, you don't hear that as much. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you do.
I think the smart internet entrepreneurs do that, but it is not something talked about. I think it's not a culture. I think it's not a general cultural thing. I think the replace and discard method is more used often than developing people. Yeah.
And so so with the training, there was formal training, but then there was also on the ground training. One of the lean principles is like you develop your people by training them, by coaching them in the Gemba. And the Gemba is a Japanese term meaning where the work is done. So
how do you say that?
Like the factory floor.
The Gemba?
Gemba. Gemba, Gemba.
Gemba, Gamba. Okay.
Yeah, the Gemba. So the Gemba is like what that is like that's where the work is done, the real work, where the real value is delivered. So in a factory, it's the factory floor, and and a clinic, it's the office, the waiting room, and even on the internet, like it's harder to do it in a remote setting, but like you could still do it by certain boards, but looking at code directly with the developer, if your software developers do the work. If it's marketing, looking at the actual copy, so that's where being in the Gemba is, because one of the things that differentiates lean management from kind of conventional management is very metaphysical, right? So it's like it's a bunch of managers, they're sitting around and they're like, oh, what's going on? And they look at a spreadsheet, they look at a PowerPoint deck that an intern made, and then they make decisions there. Whereas the lean management system is like, no, your job as a leader is to develop your people and also to solve problems and help your people become problem solvers. You can't do that sitting in a boardroom looking at an Excel sheet. You have to get off your butt and go to the Gemba, go to the work where the work is. So as opposed to an open door policy, you could say it's like an empty chair policy. You're getting up, you're going, and you're looking at where the work is done, and it's not necessarily like this idea of management by walking around, which doesn't really work. You're just walking. You're a manager. You're walking around like, hey, how's it going? How's it? No. You're there. You're looking to see like, okay, I'm supposed to be the leader of this organization. How is the value being delivered? What's really going on here? So you're not even necessarily talking to people. You're just watching. And then you're seeing things like you're asking questions, and you're noticing, hey, I've noticed that, if it's in a clinic, for example, that patient's been waiting there for 30 minutes. And you're noticing people going back and forth to get the same thing. You're noticing rework. You're noticing just people, waiting. You're noticing that there's a bunch of inventory piling up, and it's just a pile of stuff sitting there. You're noticing all these things. And as you notice these things and you see how value is being delivered or not delivered, that's when you can start having good conversations with your people to say, hey, have you noticed this? Well, let's talk together and work towards solving it. And this isn't micromanagement, because micromanagement is you look around and you say, well, I know what to do. Here you go. Do this. Here's a standard operating procedure for you to work on. Instead, with Lean, you're in the Gemba and you're working with your people to solve problems. You're training them to become problem solvers, and they're coming up with the solutions. You're just helping them with their thinking. You're not helping them come up with the specific tactics. You're helping them kind of define the problem and not jump to solutions. Because one of the biggest challenges that I have as a lean coach, as an agile practitioner, is people are always jumping to solutions. It's like, oh, we got this problem, lead time of 9 months. Oh, we know what to do. We should do X, Y, Z. And I think the problem with that is people feel like, okay, I need to have a bias towards action. I need to move quickly. And yeah, you should move quickly, but like you should test quickly. But but from the lean management point of view, testing is just 1/4 of the equation.
Gotcha.
And so if all you do is test, then that's just you're just 25% there. You want to be 100% there. So so what you would do is like, okay, I see that there's a problem here. I define the problem. You see that there's a current state, and there's an ideal state. So, for example, just kind of within the software development example, was working with a data as a service company in the telecommunications niche, and they had a problem which was handling new requests for new fields in the software. Okay. And there was no clear way to research, to define the logic, or implement throughout the pipeline that they had. In addition to that, there was legacy logic that was not consistent in different parts of the pipeline. So one place might get updated, but others not. I'm trying to be as non-technical as possible here, just to get the point through. And so the impact of the problem was pretty grim. So yeah, I think people can understand the impact. It took 11 months to implement, reprocess, and backfill data when issues were found. And obviously, 11 months to implement anything is not good, especially in a high stakes enterprise level business. And so, this resulted in a loss of trust from customers and end users. But then I worked with the team to implement what I described, which is a problem-solving solution, a 4-step problem-solving method, which got them from a lead time of 11 months to 2 months. And so that's very useful there, And so how do you do that? So the first thing is you talk about like, okay, what's the problem? Step 1 is what's the problem? Define it. What's the problem I'm trying to solve? Ideal state, current state, and then you essentially do arithmetic. You subtract. Ideal state, I want to do this in 2 months. Current state, we're wanting to do this in 11 months. What's our gap? It's 9 months.
Okay.
Okay. So now we know what the problem is.
So you define the gap as
now,
well. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but you
define the gap.
Okay. So that's the third number is the gap.
Yeah, the gap,
okay.
The measurable gap. And remember, you have to quantify these things because otherwise it's just, how do you know if you're making progress with your tests? And so you have the gap, then that's when you say, okay, you start establishing the root cause. So you say, okay, where did we find this problem? Where did we first encounter this problem? Who found it? And then you start going through the 5 whys. Why this? And then why that? Why that? You dig until you find a root cause.
Wait, can I ask you? I'm sorry to interrupt. Is it you just ask why 5 different layers down, or are there specific 5 whys?
No, 5 layers down.
5 layers down.
Yeah,
so if I go,
the first why is never obvious. Yeah.
So what if, like, for instance, if I say I'm cold, and then you go, why? Because there's no heat. And then the question, why is there no heat? Because there's no oil in the burner. Why is there no oil in the burner? Because we didn't pay the bill. Why didn't we pay? Is that what you mean in your tracing?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because otherwise, in a conventional management setting, you'd be like, oh, Wes, I'm cold. And I'm like, no problem, buddy. I got you. Here's a jacket.
Okay. That's a start, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't address.
It doesn't solve the problem.
It doesn't address that somebody forgot to pay the oil bill.
Yeah, right. And then that probably leads to another discussion as to like, do you have a job? are you having income coming in? And so that's this point, is when you do things, you want to be able to solve the problems at the root cause. Otherwise, you're just like a chicken with your head cut off. You're just jumping from one thing to another.
And does it a rule of thumb that at the layer of the 5th why you finally start getting? Is that just a rule of thumb, just a handy?
It's a rule of thumb. Yeah. I mean, for me, like, just having done this for a while, like sometimes I find that, you could do it with a few less whys. Sometimes you need to dig a little bit deeper and do with a few more whys.
But that's a general. That's sort of
and how.
Gotcha.
That's a general thing.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so you've defined. I love this. So you've defined the current state, the ideal state. You define the gap, and now you want to figure out why. Why are we in this? Why are we where we are right now? Is that the issue? Why are we where we are now?
So why this gap specifically? So why that gap? So we can, because it's not as technical. Why you're cold, and so we established maybe because you're not paying the bill, and then there could be reasons behind that we could explore. And so and so once we have an idea of like we've exhausted our whys, and then things are starting to get repetitive, then you'd be like, okay, well, it's time to talk about the root cause then. So based off of our drilling deep into the whys, there's only really 3 big root causes that you can look at. Either there's a lack of a defined process, and when I say defined process, I mean written. A written process that people know about, that's easy to follow, that they know, okay, if I follow this list, I get the result that I want. If that's not there, then that's probably one of your root causes. Or maybe it's lack of adherence to a process. So you have a process, it is written down, it is clear, but people aren't just following it, and maybe it's just a matter of having a conversation and just reminding them, hey. Or it could be just an inadequate system. There's so much broken within your business that you have to. It's not just one thing to solve. That you have to step back and maybe take a balcony view, and then from there, that's when you do the hypothesis. That's where you do the experimentation. So then we could say like if, and again, I feel bad about using you as an example, Ken, because I know you're not this, but let's say Joe, who's cold and because he's not paying his electric his bill. Like, so we come up with a hypothesis, like if Joe, you know, got up and wrote wrote a sales letter to sell his services, you know, he would have regular income where he could pay his, you know, his electric bill. And then obviously we define like, you know, like how much income we can expect to come in and what specifically he'd be doing. Is it just a sales letter? Is it something else? And then that's your test. And then you say, okay, you know, we're gonna do this test. We're gonna maybe check on it, maybe a couple of times, maybe 3 times, see how it's going. And if we're closing the gap, great. If we're not quite there, then back to the drawing board. And so that's what I'm saying. So that's why I said the testing piece. People always talk about test. Yes, testing is great, but your test has to be there to solve something, right? When I was in Salem Health, whenever anyone was like, hey, we should do this, the answer would always be, what problem are you trying to solve?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. No, clearly.
Yeah. And because sometimes it's like, what problem are you trying to solve? And the answer would be like, and they try to save face and come up with a BS answer. So that's an indication they didn't really think through.
So the problem that I'm always trying to solve is how can I take limited resources and get a whole lot more bang for my buck? This is just my, it's my methodology. So I guess this is really interesting. This is a much more thorough, kind of repeatable methodology, which is good. It's good for things to be repeatable and not be dependent on, like, let's say you have somebody that, you know, they've been doing something for 40 plus years. They may not even know why they're testing the things they're testing, but they're testing the right things based on, quote, instinct. But it's not really instinct. It's they're intimately familiar with the environment. They're intimately familiar with the problems. The problem being we want to get more done with less. But that being said, it's a good thing to articulate all this so that everybody can use this methodology. It's not. In other words, I just did a recording. It went out coincidentally yesterday, where I'm pushing the need. Where I'm pushing the need for testing, test fast, you know, and that's almost like a professional athlete telling somebody, you know, run through the, you know, football, in a football example. Well, just run through the line, you know, if you're a defensive quarterback, just run through the line. Well, that may work if you're a professional, what do they call that guy? I can't think of the name, but anyway, there's a position in football where you're supposed to you're supposed to crash through the line and get the quarterback, you know? And so that's perfectly valid advice if you're dealing with professional athletes that already understand the game thoroughly inside and out, have already been thoroughly trained in what to look for, right? But what if if somebody that's new or relatively new, and you give them the same instruction? Well, they can't really follow the instruction. I guess is my point. So anyway, I love the fact that this is a thoroughly delineated system.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Ken, because I think when you go decide to test things, I suspect that you already have the problem defined, the problem that you're trying to solve defined in your mind. You might be writing down, you might not be writing it down, you might not be going through, it might not be as systematic for you. But your instincts, like you said, are probably honed enough where it's like, you know, the problem you're trying to solve, and which the gap that you're trying to close. But I think you can get away with that because you're very experienced and very well immersed in your domain. But you also run a pretty tight, like a small ship. You don't have an army of people working for you.
That's
right?
True. That's true.
Yeah. Whereas, like, if you're trying to scale and you're trying to build a business that would outlast you, and not still deliver high quality, fast lead time, yet with limited resources, then a different tack is needed. And that's where, like, you need to help your people kind of think like this. And initially, it's going to be uncomfortable and it feels stiff and formal, like any new skill. But then even they will start getting it, especially if you make it visible. So if you like take the problem solving that they do, just write it down. You know, if it's in a physical office location, just put it on the wall. You just put it on the wall and see like, hey, you know, how close are we to the gap? Everyone sees it. You know, you could do similar things with tools online, like, you know, Miro is a good one. I caution people against using Jira, but like things like Miro, things like that, just things that replicate a physical board that visually shows the work. That's the key thing here, is the visual management. That way people see it. They see the problems visibly, or at the very least representations of them, and they're looking at it every day. And then that helps tremendously.
This raises a really interesting question too, and then we'll get back to the specifics of executing. Is I'm biased towards a small footprint. It's just a personal bias, but the reality is there are certain goals that if you want to attain them, you do need to engage other people in a, you know, very involved and serious way, like even hire people, you know. And so it's, but I will say this, even if you are a solo operator, all these things make perfect sense. Like the idea of writing down, even for me, writing down, okay, why am I doing this particular test? It can't hurt. It can't hurt to do that. It's one thing that they always tell stock traders or commodities traders or now Bitcoin traders to do. When you make a trade, write down, okay, what did I think was going to happen? You know, because what happens is you get into a trade and it's going up or it's going down and you get emotional and you get carried away and you forget what the objective was, you know, or what the logic was. Why am I even doing this, right? Why am I even doing this thing? So whether you're a solo operator or somebody that wants to expand, and I'm actually, strangely enough, now that I'm retired, I'm in the position where I am actually expanding the number of people I work with. And this is resonating so strongly with me. The idea of taking the time, patience, right, to help develop the people you're working with, because you're probably not going to get like, you know, super ninja 100% ready to go special operators. You know, you're going to get people that are somewhere on the spectrum. They're learning, they're working their way up, but they don't know it all. So if you want to have this bigger if you, let's put it this way, if you suddenly have this bigger goal that involves engaging more people, the skills that Wes is talking about right now are essential. Like I would venture to say you can't live without them. I mean, you could, but it would be pretty miserable to try. So let's go on. So we've talked about the fact that there's often three basic problems: the lack of a defined process, a process that's not being followed, or your process is embedded in a larger network of processes that have problems, and this larger network has to be addressed.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and you know, one of the things that I think people will come and they'll hear this and kind of, there might be some, you know, if you're listening to this, you might have the temptation to push back, and you might say, well, lean is just for manufacturing, and isn't it just for cost reduction? And I'm not in the manufacturing business, Wes. I'm doing this on mine, you know, and that's not the point. It's like, because the roots of lean are in automobile manufacturing with the Toyota production system does not mean that it only applies to manufacturing. That kind of faulty logic is analogous to saying just because direct response marketing has its roots in mail order, you know, marketing means that direct response marketing only works with mail order. You can't do it anyway. Like, that's absurd.
Well, but you know, so, let me just kind of just tell you, this was literally the case. There were people in the early 90s that had internet-based businesses who thought that direct response was irrelevant, that it had nothing, that this was the internet was a brand new media, a brand new world, and to look at grimy direct response techniques, oh, that's terrible, right? And then on the other side, in the direct response, the professional direct marketing world, they were looking at the internet going, well, this has nothing to do with us. We're mail and radio and TV. So this, as ludicrous as what you're saying sounds, as what you're using as an example sounds, that was actually the reality. I mean, of course, now it seems
Incredible.
crazy that anybody would think that way, but there were literally high level, like I'll tell you right now, Mark Andreessen did not understand direct response and did not see how it had a place on the internet when I tried to explain it to him. And
Wow.
and the head, yeah, and the head of the oh, there was so much talk about pushback. Oh, the internet people, they tolerated me because I was putting on all these great conferences in San Francisco, and giving people an opportunity to share their businesses. And but they thought that my personal ideas on direct response were, you know, not really not that compelling, right? And then I remember speaking at the Direct Marketing Club of Northern California, and they just weren't feeling it. They weren't feeling this internet thing. So anyway, your point is actually real. Like anybody that's listening to this, and this is one of the things that we do in the System Club that we always work at. We're looking for ideas from outside our box that we can bring in and enliven what we're doing. And Wes, you may know this story, and I'd like to, and a lot of our club members know it, but it's so important to remember. Back in the 1960s in Southern California, which was the first car culture in the world, right? This guy had this brilliant idea of doing drive-in banking. You drive to a window, you wouldn't even have to get out of your car. That was invented in Southern California. Then a fast food restaurant executive saw that and said, we could deliver food that way too, can't we? And I'm sure there was pushback to beat the band, but that's now 1/3 of the fast food industry. So it would be very easy to say, well, what does Toyota and its lean manufacturing methods have to do with my business selling it, whatever? Well, anyway, long story, Wes is correct. That's my opinion. So take us deeper into the lean, agile world.
Yeah. And so with lean, and so just to kind of like give people a certain level of confidence about lean applying to their business, we already talked about the 4-step problem solving situation, and even just with an example of Ken's poor, cold person who's cold, we were able to use that problem solving methodology in that situation. Nothing to do with cars. And so this is just a nice little statement from, I think, Bob Emiliano, sorry if I mispronounced his name, as to why lean applies to all processes and all organizations and industries. One, all work is made up of processes. It doesn't matter if you're a baker, shoemaker, candlestick maker. I think that's the term you like to use, right, Ken?
Right.
All processes have customers and suppliers. And those customers and suppliers don't necessarily need to be physical. They could be digital too. And all processes consist of value-added work, non-value-added but necessary work, and all processes contain waste. So what lean management wants to do is to say, listen, we want to get the value to the customer in as fast a time with as high quality and as high quality of the time as possible. Now, the way to do that is to look at our work end to end, what's the value stream, and saying, okay, this is value added, this is not, and so we're going to eliminate the waste. And so within lean, there are different types of wastes that they always look at to try to eliminate. Rework, waiting, like I mentioned, even inventory, because like if my fridge, if it's full of food that I'm not using, that I don't need, what's going to happen? Food's going to rot. So that's waste. And I can't use that space.
Right.
So that's another waste. And now I can't make the meal that I wanted to make. So it's just like one thing after another. So it's really important. That's why lean is so focused on waste reduction, but not necessarily just cost reduction. That's really a really important thing. At Salem Health, we worked with staff. The projects of because we made it accountable. By the way, here's a little pro tip. If you want to implement lean in your organization, really implement it from top to bottom. First, you have to apply it on yourself. This whole idea of lean for thee, but not for me, isn't going to work. but also to get your people engaged, have it be part of their compensation, their performance. So say, okay, I know so-and-so, you're a virtual assistant and you do virtual assistant things, but I also have an expectation that you do at least one lean project a year, that you lead one. And you could pick whatever problem you want to solve, Mr. Virtual assistant, but you have to lead a lean problem solving, and I'll be there to coach you and help you through it, of course, so you're not on your own. And so when we did that, we you know, whether the front desk staff, physicians, medical assistants, they weren't thinking about cost reduction. They're thinking about, oh man, I'm going back and forth getting the same papers over and over again, or man, I need to room this patient, but my lead time is, or you know, clinical outcomes for patients with diabetes aren't good. We need to get them up to a certain point. So they're looking at things not just related to cost. They're looking at things like quality and lead time. But nonetheless, when they went and they did those projects, even though they were small projects, as simple as rearranging things on your desk so that you so that you're more efficient, we actually were able to survive a crunch, a financial crunch that hospitals in Oregon experienced, where because Oregon is pretty liberal, you know, they said we want to expand Medicaid, and so one of the genius ways they said to expand Medicaid was tax hospitals, a very high tax, and so some of those hospitals couldn't survive that. They were in the red. You know, there was one hospital system in Oregon affected by this that it laid off 200 people and then rehired a bunch of them, but for lower rates.
Oh my
And all these
goodness.
crazy other shenanigans. But
Good
whereas,
word.
you know, Salem Health, Salem Health, despite not being the biggest or what most well-funded, we were in the black the whole time. And what the plan was to survive this even more and get ahead of this financial crunch even more. It wasn't to ask donors for money. It was, we need to do even more lean work. So now 2 projects required per year for every person to do, and that's how you do it. So it's not just cost reduction, although that's kind of a side benefit.
And the neat thing too is whereas one company decided, well, maybe we can, you know, squeeze our employees, you know, and kind of really abuse them in
Yeah.
a sense, right? Let's fire them and then hire them back at a lower rate. I bet Salem didn't resort to that kind of employee abuse, basically.
We did not fire a single person. Now, we had to, for some positions, we had to redeploy them because those positions, a call had to be made. So, like, you're in X position, we can't afford to support that position anymore, but we're not firing you. We're just moving you to another position with the organization where you get, relatively equal pay. So we're still keeping you. We're still keeping you and all your talent and all your lean knowledge that we work so hard to inculcate. We're not firing you.
Because it seems to be a lot of this is really profound stuff, because a lot of companies will solve their problems by taking it out of their employees' hides, right? You know,
yeah,
you're right. They don't, and
then they complain, oh, it's so hard to find good help.
Right.
And they keep doing this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, you know, take an even bigger view of this. You know, we've all been through this period now where people in boardrooms have arbitrarily largely decided the fates of hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people on the planet, based on, you know, scientific illiteracy, based on greed, and so on and so forth. And that kind of activity where the top dictates the minutia and the details of how everybody is going to operate, independent of actually walking the floor, which in this system is called the Gemba, right?
Yep.
Right. I mean, that is exactly what we have been through the last 2.5 years, and it has inflicted terrible human cost for no good end too, by the way. We won't go into that subject too much, but that would, sure, had we had a lean, because part of lean is there needs to be a leader, but the goal of the leader is to decentralize the thinking. and engagement and the creativity and the problem identification and the problem solving. In other words, it's not, hey, there's going to be 5 guys in a room that are going to tell the rest of the company how to operate. It's we're going to methodically, at significant energetic expense, but we're going to make this investment in raising up everybody's problems identifying and problem solving ability. Would that be fair?
100%, because the thing is that, you know, every person in your organization, even if it's a small one, has something to contribute to the value stream that you're trying to deliver to your customers. And the thing is, you as a leader might be talented in your domain, like, okay, internet marketing, whatever it might be, but you don't know VA work. You don't know you don't know the ins and outs of being an accountant. You don't know the ins and outs of being a pharmacist, or a software developer. So what you need to do is you need to engage those people who are doing the work on the front lines to be problem solvers, because there's so much complexity in running any kind of profitable business that you have no choice except to do that. If you want to do more with less at a high quality, you have to develop the problem solving capability of your people. Because you're right, you're not, the people who you hire, they're going to be average people, typically, right? They're going to be middle of the road, good people. I mean, this expectation that every person you hire is going to be a superstar is false, because they're probably going to be expensive. B, they're probably a superstar in one context, but they may not be a superstar in your context.
And also, can I say, add another possibility? They may be average now, but after being exposed to the information and experience, and they may turn out to be they may become superstars if they're cultivated.
Yeah.
It could happen. That could happen too.
Yeah.
But it won't happen if you don't cultivate them.
Yep. Exactly. And I found over and over again, whether it's in healthcare and IT or whatever, the more I implement, the more we implement lean thinking within the teams, the more people who are quote unquote problem employees with attitudinal issues, that they changed. They changed over, it wasn't overnight change, but they changed because impediments were removed from their way, and they reacted maybe in a way that was not mature, but it's not because of their inherent evilness. It's just because they're reacting to a broken system, and they don't have that level of consciousness to speak to it eloquently, right? And even if they did, there might be fear that they'll get fired for quote unquote pushing back against the boss.
So this is really, above and beyond this being a system that generates profits, ultimately, it's a very humane system at its root. Absolutely. Yeah, this whole, I'm the CEO, I'm going to be the Dark Lord, and whipping my orcs to run. Yeah, it doesn't work. People aren't like that, especially now with the Great Resignation. I mean, they don't have to work for your company. So if they're good, why not just keep them and create a situation where they can be successful? And and I think you like one of the biggest wastes I see is actually in the SaaS space, in the startup space. Because a lot of these startups, especially if they're getting a lot of investor money, they're getting just like this huge influx of cash, and so it's less about, okay, what value can we deliver long-term thinking to our customers. It's like, oh, we got to spend. Investors are telling us to spend. We got to spend. So like hiring, I had one client, they're hiring an army of people, and I'm like thinking, do you really need all those people? Like, I don't think they do. And spending like north of $2 million a month buying ads, online. And it's like, okay, fine, we get it. Yes, we know the Dan Kennedyism. The more you can spend to acquire a customer, the more successful you'll be. And I think even Mr. Kennedy would say there's more. There has to be stuff. There has to be behind that.
You have to acquire your customers and you have to keep them. I mean, don't you have your 3 rules of business? That, what was it like? Ask people, ask people to buy, ask them to try,
Right.
and once they're with you,
Oh,
don't give them a reason to go away.
right, right. But yeah, yeah,
Right, yeah, and so
well, this is probably, this isn't, a manifestation of this top-down thinking. The VC throws a lot of money on the fledgling entrepreneurs, and his
Mhm.
vision is hire a lot of people, spend a lot of ads, buy a lot of ads, and hopefully it will stick, because they are not really, they have so many little bets. That for
Mhm.
the individual entrepreneur, this is everything. This is his or her whole game. But for the VC,
Yeah,
they're like, hey, I'll put money into 20 of these things. Somebody will figure it out and we'll have a 50 to 1 or 100 to 1 payoff. So who cares? That's the only way I can
yeah,
explain how VCs operate, because they seem to be completely disconnected from the reality of the businesses they're funding. And they often seem to be pushing the very things that you're talking about. They're pushing hire more people, get more desks, increase the ad spend. And it's like, and as you point out, why? Why are we doing these things?
yeah. Yeah, yeah, and so like I think like with if you go into a Toyota factory, one of the things they'll say is like, we don't keep a lot of inventory because a lot of inventory hides problems. And I think you could use that analogy with the startup VC world, is like a lot of investor money hides problems and when you hide problems, you can't solve them. So like, yeah, you're spending all this money to acquire customers. You're not necessarily qualifying those customers that well, saying, hey, is this a good fit for this customer? We just want subscriptions. And so they subscribe to your doohickey software, but because it's a bad qualification process, you want to cancel.
Right,
You
right.
want to cancel from your subscription, and like, oh, it's hard for me to cancel. I don't know how to cancel. It's so hard, and so then it becomes a customer service issue. And now they're telling all their friends about how this company are kind of sleazy. They try to pull you in and they make it super hard. So it's just like one thing after another, and like, yeah, you're getting all these customers at the front end, but or you're getting these buyers at the front end, but you're not really getting customers. And VCs might not care about that, maybe because they just want to make an exit quickly. But if you're thinking about the long game, it's not going to work.
That's a really good point. The VC may be able to cash out before the company crashes and burns, based on the illusion
Yeah.
of health that was fomented by throwing a little bit of money into the situation. From the VC's point, it's a little bit of money, and right, he by definition, really, VCs typically aren't in it for the long run. They are trying to put in $1 and take out 50. And as soon as they see that $50 is on the table, they're cashing out and out the door, and they don't necessarily care what happens 2 or 3 or 5 years later. I think in fact, I think that's one
Exactly.
of the big,
And
yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's one of the big complaints people have about the VC culture of Silicon Valley, that it's really, they always, this, we hear about the success stories. We don't hear about the carnage of that happens both to employees, that happens to entrepreneurs, that happens to investors. We see the 1 out of 100 super success stories where somebody puts in $1 and takes out 100. But we're missing all the other stories where companies that could have had, this is interesting too, and I wonder what you think about this, companies that could have had a long trajectory can crash and burn because they were being pushed to grow too fast, to put too many numbers on, to put high numbers on the board, whether the numbers were integral or had integrity or not. I'm not talking about deception, but I'm talking about, I mean, you could juice a company to make it seem like it's very successful without being, lying. For instance, acquire a lot of customers, a lot of buyers, acquire a lot of buyers really fast. You can say, well, look at our growth curve.
Right.
It's unbelievable. Well, as you point out,
Yeah.
if the service is terrible, 6 months from now, you're going to be looking at a crater, a smoking crater. Yeah. So I get, this goes to something that I've said. We the bootstrap entrepreneurs of the world should not be studying Silicon Valley. We should be studying what
No,
Wes is
absolutely
talking
not.
about.
That's the worst thing you can do. That's the worst thing you can do. And as a matter of fact, I've been studying the biography of Walt Disney. And actually, Ben Settle recommended it to me. So shout out to Ben if he's listening to this. He's like, I don't care why I stop mentioning my name. And then, I'm joking. But you know, and I'm reading about Walt Disney, and like there are things that I notice that are very much in alignment with lean, particularly lean product development. But there are other things that are typical of the whole. You know, he went into debt a lot. Like I feel like if lean management existed during his time, you know, because I think at that time it was starting to become it was starting to get boring. He would have had a lot less stress. But yeah, you know, and to your point about the misalignment of incentives between what the VC want and what the entrepreneur want, it goes back to the Gemba, right? Being in the Gemba. So the entrepreneur, if he's successful enough to get his company to a point where VCs are interested, he's probably in the Gemba a lot. He's probably, you know, knowing the value stream. He knows what the work is. He knows where the waste is. But when he goes to the VCs aren't interested in walking in the Gemba. They want to see PowerPoint decks. They want to hear a story. They want to see spreadsheets. They want to see if your analyst can duel with their nerdy analyst. Then, you know, and it all happens in a boardroom or in a Zoom call. And so it's like a layer of things. It's like you said, the misalignment of things, like the VCs want to make that quick exit, but two, they don't really know the business that they're investing in as well as they think they are. They know the PowerPoint deck. They know you know, the boardroom body language. They know the Excel sheets, but the actual work, they don't know, and they probably don't want to know. They probably think it's beneath them.
Yeah, this is so good. Hey, we're coming up on our hour. Wes, can you recommend any books that people can read? Do you have a website about this particular subject that people can go to, or?
Yeah. So one book that I would recommend, and it's not my book, so you know that this is a legit recommendation. Now this will intimidate you, right? But if you have the courage to just like read it, you'll benefit a lot. It's called the Toyota Way by Jeffrey K. Liker. Toyota Way: The 14 Management Principles from the World's Greatest Manufacturer, and he goes in depth into these 14 principles, and they're timeless, they're evergreen, they are not limited to making cars, so they will apply to your business as long as you're comfortable changing how you think. Because the price of the Toyota Way isn't having to borrow money. It's not, you know, you don't have to sacrifice your firstborn child. It's how you think as a leader, and having a certain willingness to kind of follow what the Navy SEALs say. The Navy SEALs have a saying, which is go slow to go smooth to go fast.
Oh.
Right? And so if you're willing to do that, to go slow, understand that you grasp your situation, solve the problems in a scientific way, then you can go fast. But if that's not appealing to you, then yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, borrow money, and hire an army of VCs, hire an army of vendors and fire half of them, and we'll see how you do in 10 years. So that's my recommendation as far as reading material. And you know, but if you're looking for something a little lighter and more towards behavioral science, you could go to my website, powerpersuasion.net, and if you opt in, you'll get a free copy of my book, which essentially combines behavioral science and lean thinking, and shows case studies of different small business owners I worked with who benefited from those strategies. So that's a little lighter read.
Okay.
But yeah, the Toyota Way is something to read if you're very ambitious.
Great. Well, Wes, so it's Power. What a great domain name, by the way, powerpersuasion.net. Very nice.
Yeah, powerpersuasion.net.
Yeah, very nice. So people can go there this minute and subscribe and get Wes's book, which I'm going to be doing as soon as this call's over. And then if they have a taste for this information, which I think I do, I think everybody that's listened does, then they can go and get the Toyota Way book and dig into that. Well, great, Wes, thank you so much. This has been even more illuminating than I had hoped. I had high hopes, and the high hopes were exceeded. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Ken. This was a pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, and the timing is perfect because on the one hand, I've just told everybody to just test fast, and I knew there's something behind it. Now we know what it is. I can now articulate it better. And two, I happen to be wanting to grow certain things, and it's going to require people. And this is a great guide on how to work with people most effectively and humane. It's really nice, the melding of humane treatment with effective. It's effective as well, you know. Which we need.
Yeah,
more.
one of the principles of lean is it's literally respect for people. You know, it's literally, that's one of the principles, is respect for people. So yeah.
Very good. Well, we'll end on that note. Wes, thanks again, and we'll see you around the internet.
Thank you, sir. Take care.